I actually watched Real Sports a couple of weeks ago, and Trevor Bauer, they did a story on Trevor Bauer, his background with him and his father, the way he threw the ball, the way he really adjusted his style of throwing to the major league style, to science. What is your thoughts of Trevor Bauer as a pitcher now that he joined your team, the Cincinnati Reds?
I didn't know what to think of him before we got him. We signed him. He had just had that incident where he threw the ball over the wall. And so you're kind of thinking, well, I don't really know necessarily what to make out of this guy. And then we got him. And, you have some conversations with him. He's a very, very fascinating guy. He's extremely intelligent, very cerebral. He's just a very fascinating human being. And the fact that he approaches the game the way he does, it's not surprising once you talk to him. And to me, that's a pretty interesting thing about him. Just the way he looks at the game in an analytical sense, because that's the way his brain works. So many athletes just go out and they play the game, and it's so much more physical than it is in the game of baseball. I don't mean to downplay the mental aspect of it, because it's certainly there, but just the way he approaches it from, more of a scientific way, it's really it's very fascinating. And it's fun to sit down and kind of pick his brain about that. Just pick his brain about the way he sees things and life. This is a guy that away from the field is extremely intelligent, not just when it comes to baseball, just intelligent overall. I mean, the guy designs and builds drones from scratch. I mean, every piece on him, he'll use his 3D printer to print them out and print out the parts. Basically, the only thing he won't build on them is the little motors, and everything else he kind of does himself. So just a really, really incredible human being from an intellectual standpoint, and really, I think he's a pretty misunderstood guy, pretty good guy overall.
Do you think his fiery personality is something that these young players on this Reds team could embrace? Because they already have one of those with Joey Votto, who's very, very electric on the field in terms of him speaking a lot. Do you think having another one maybe in the rotation will help these young players more, and being especially somebody that is analytical, like you were saying?
Well, I think you got to have some fire on the team to be good, and this team certainly has that. I think Mike Moustakas is the guy that they brought in that has that fire. You mentioned Votto. Amir Garrett is not short on it in the bullpen. There is certainly some intensity on this team, and I think even though you might not necessarily see it a lot on the field, Sonny Gray, his fire burns pretty hot too. So there's certainly some guys on this team that have that fire, and Trevor Bauer fits in nicely with that. His might be a little more outwardly displayed, more so than some of the other guys. But I think he's a great fit in the rotation, just because he's a little different than some of the other guys we have in the staff. So it's nice. You don't want to have five guys that all give you the same look. Trevor Bauer certainly gives you a different look, and I think he's a good addition. He understands the game so well, and he's worked quite a bit with Kyle Bodie, who the Reds added as the pitching coordinator this year. So those two have worked together immensely over the years. So Trevor can kind of help relay some of those teachings, and Derek Johnson, the Reds pitching coach, and Trevor Bauer certainly seem to be on the same page. So there's a lot that he knows about pitching that he can certainly relay on to some of the younger guys on the staff.
We are talking to Cincinnati Reds play-by-play radio announcer Tommy Thrall. You were just talking about Joey Votto and some of the veterans on this team. Sonny Gray, who played for the New York Yankees. It didn't work out with the New York Yankees, but he went to Cincinnati, and he played pretty well last year. I think he was an all-star. He was a
Cy Young runner-up, I think.
Yes, he was an all-star, and we all know how good Sonny Gray could be, especially how dominant he was with the A's. He was a runner-up quite a few times as a Cy Young candidate with the Oakland Athletics. He went to the Yankees. Just the big city didn't work out for him. The Yankees traded him to Cincinnati, and he's been playing very, very well. With this veteran team, Does Cincinnati have an opportunity this year to make a run, if there is a season, to the playoffs? I think they have a lot of talent, a lot of young talent, and a lot of veteran talent to this team that we haven't seen in a very long time.
There's no question. I mean, this team's set up to do that. You look at last year's team, they finished below 500 again, and it wasn't a great season by any stretch of the imagination. They're a pretty talented team, and they were a lot of fun to watch. This is a team where they kind of, in the offseason, they filled in the pieces, the missing pieces, and to me, this team is certainly poised to be able to make a run. Anytime you have 5 starters like the Reds have this year, you've got a chance to not just make the postseason, but go on a run in the postseason. That's the thing that is key. You've got to have a stable of relievers and steady relievers. And you've got to have a rotation, and this rotation is as deep as anybody's. I mean, I'll take the Reds rotation. You give me any of them. There's some bigger names out there, but I'll take the Reds rotation against anybody. The way Anthony DeSclafani finished the season last year, he was outstanding. We've obviously talked about Trevor Bauer, Sonny Gray with the year that he had last year, bouncing back and proving to be the pitcher that the Yankees thought they had. But as you guys pointed out, it didn't work out for him in New York. He got back on track, reunited with his college pitching coach, Derek Johnson, who I talked about before when I was talking about Trevor. Derek Johnson was Sonny Gray's pitching coach at Vanderbilt. So those two already have a great relationship. I think that played a factor in Sonny Gray getting back on track. And then a guy we haven't talked about yet, but Luis Castillo. I mean, this is a guy who through the first half of the season last year,
fantastic.
He might be the Cy Young frontrunner. And he's certainly a year older now. He's a young pitcher that I think is going to continue to develop, and I think this is going to be a big year for him. If he continues to make the progress that he's capable of making in his career, and he's got arguably the best changeup in the game, and don't sleep on the fastball that can get up there in the upper 90s as well. If he continues to progress, there's no reason to believe that he can't be a Cy Young candidate this season. And I talked about Wade Miley, another veteran guy that kind of rounds out the staff with Anthony DeSclafani. So this is a pitching staff, a rotation that is, like I said, is as good as just about anybody you could find in the game. And when you have that, you're going to be in a lot of games. And then they made the improvements to the lineup, getting a guy like Mike Moustakas, who will play second base. And you look at the numbers side by side of the production that he brings with what they had out of second base last year. It's night and day, especially when you look at some of the analytical stats. Nick Castellanos is going to play right field on a regular basis. And then you have Shogo Akiyama, who's going to bring some stability to the top of the order. And that just lengthens the lineup. There's a little more depth there than what they've had in the past. And that's something that I think is going to be a big factor this year. So there's no reason to believe that this Reds team can't make a run.
One of the best second halves in all of baseball was Aristides Aquino, 19 home runs, 56 RBIs, one of the best stretches we've seen. In terms from a young player, in terms of what he was as a rookie to this year, do you expect him to maybe have a bigger role, maybe hit higher up in the lineup, like a number 3 or number 4 spot in the lineup this year? Or you think they'll still try to ease him in because he's a young player?
You know, there's some thought that he might not have even made the team out of spring training. Again, that's how much depth this team has this year. You look at the numbers he had last year, they can be a little deceptive if you just look at the overall numbers because they were outstanding for a month. I mean, he set the baseball world on fire. He had the best first month just about any player ever. It seemed like every time he hit a home run over that span, over the first 4 or 5 weeks that he was up, it was another record-setting home run. Then he fell off. At the end of the year, I mean, the numbers really fell off for him in September after his red-hot August. The real Aristides Aquino, you hope, is somewhere in the middle. I don't think what he was in August, you can expect that from him on a day-in and day-out basis. And you certainly hope the player that struggled through September isn't the player that he is either. So you hope the truth lies somewhere in the middle there. If that's the case, he's going to certainly be a great option off the bench as an extra outfielder. There's just not a spot for him right now. I mean, you have Nick Senzel, who's pretty much the everyday center fielder, Shogo Akiyama, who figures to be the regular left fielder. Jesse Winker's in the mix out there as well. Phillip Ervin's another guy that is out of options and that had a really nice season platooning when Winker was healthy last year. And then Nick Castellanos, you don't go out and get a guy like that if you don't expect him to play on a regular basis, and he's going to be a regular right fielder. So it's hard to find the at-bats. Now, with the rules that they're talking about, if and when the season gets played this year, it sounds like there would probably be a universal DH. Well, that opens up a spot in the lineup for Aquino, and I think there's a very real possibility that he might be the guy that fills that void. But again, you also had a pretty successful platoon situation that was a little more consistent when you had Winker and Irvin in there as a platoon situation. So that's another option David Bell could go with. But either way, there's certainly some depth, but I wouldn't expect Aristides Aquino to necessarily be an everyday guy. They're certainly intrigued by what he did last year, and they want to see what's there, but they'll have to get creative to get some at-bats in there for him.
We are talking to Cincinnati Reds play-by-play radio announcer Tommy Thrall. Well, you stole one of my questions, Tommy, and I want to know your opinion. We've talked to a lot of play-by-play National League guys in the last couple of weeks, and I wanted to. A lot of National League guys are complaining that the MLB is trying to implement the DH to the National League rules. What are your thoughts to that?
Well, I certainly don't want to complain about it. I understand what they're doing. And, I think our beat writer with The Athletic, he tweeted something out a few days ago, and I'm going to misquote him here because I can't remember exactly the quote. But my heart really likes the National League style where the pitcher bats. But at the end of the day, you're not seeing a quality at bat when you have a pitcher up against another pitcher. I mean, when you have a pitcher hitting, that's just not going to be a quality at bat more often than not. There are rare exceptions, but that's anomaly. That's not something that we see on a regular basis. It's only going to become lesser and lesser that you have pitchers that are quality hitters as well, and that can give you a good at bat. So does it maybe improve the quality of the game a little bit? Yeah, I guess I could concede that that's the case. Does it take away some of the strategy in the game? Yeah, I think it does. And I like the way the National League styles play, to tell you the truth. I love it. And so I hate to see that go, but I think it's just something that, regardless of how you feel about it, you need to learn how to accept it, just because I think one way or another it's coming. It's kind of a tough reality for me to accept, but it is what it is. And I think, I grew up watching American League style baseball, and, I work in the National League now, and I certainly enjoy both styles of baseball. The game's great either way you have it. So it's tough, but I think it is something that's coming whether we like it or not.
One thing I've argued with that whole subject is it's going to change a lot of World Series strategy because there's all of these interleague play now, and because of roster construction as a whole too. A lot of rosters, like you were saying with the Reds, are very deep now where they can move different guys in. So do you think that'll impact in terms of World Series strategy, in terms of what they could do, being there's a lot of differences, like you were saying, between the National League and American League strategies?
Well, it levels the playing field for sure, because I think the American League teams, even though the American League has done fine in the World Series, American League teams are at a little bit more of a disadvantage when they have to have their pitchers bat in World Series games than the National League teams. So, yeah, I think it just levels the playing field a little bit. But I don't, I think to the average fan, you'll know a difference because it's there, but you're not going to notice the change that much. And maybe I'm naive in saying that, but I don't know how much you'll really notice the change. And I get why they would do it this year. It would be because you're playing yourself and 9 other teams because you're playing American and National League almost an even schedule with the way it's been proposed. So that makes sense why they would test it out this year. But as far as the World Series goes, I just think it levels the playing field a little bit on that stage.